Millions of Americans could tell you exactly where they were and what they were doing on November 22, 1963. That is, of course, the day the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was shot and killed by an assassin. The day changed history in more ways than one, and even 6 decades after the event, it continues to be one of the most talked about and debated moments in American history. To this day, questions remain about whether or not Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, acted alone, and the grainy video footage taken by a bystander that day provides more questions than answers.
It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma!
But what if it had never happened? What if Kennedy hadn't been wearing his back brace that day and was able to duck the second fatal bullet? Or what if his motorcade through Dallas had taken a different route? What would the second half of the Kennedy administration have looked like, and would he have even served a second term? As he rode through Dallas on that fateful day, John F. Kennedy was preparing for the 1964 presidential election, and writer Scott Bomboy believes he was poised to win, pointing to his 58% approval rating, which was in the range of those of Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, all of whom won re-election. At the time of Kennedy's assassination, Republican Barry Goldwater was the likely choice to oppose him in '64, according to the National Constitution Center. The two men were friends, and the Arizona senator dropped out of the election after Kennedy's death, only to re-enter it because he disliked Lyndon B. Johnson. Would Kennedy have been able to defeat Goldwater? Author Bryce Zabel used his novel Surrounded by Enemies, What If Kennedy Survived Dallas, to speculate that there would have been investigations into Kennedy's extramarital affairs and purported ties to organized crime.
Where sex was concerned, John F. Kennedy thought he was untouchable, invulnerable.
Those hypothetical investigations could have derailed Kennedy's re-election bid or even led to impeachment before he could run for office again. Kennedy's successor, Lyndon Baines Johnson, is credited with passing the Civil Rights Act, a key piece of Kennedy legislation that was stalled in Congress at the time of his assassination.
The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities.
Johnson told America that the best way to honor Kennedy's legacy would be to pass the Civil Rights Act, but he still had to negotiate with Congress to get it done. The process took several months, ultimately passing in July 1964. If Kennedy had survived, the legislation might have been doomed, at least for a while. With an election looming and Southern Democrats opposed to the bill, Kennedy might have tabled it until after the 1964 election. Even then, Kennedy would have faced a protracted battle getting it pushed through, according to the National Constitution Center.
We're gonna wake up Lincoln, tell him to get up and stop patting his feet.
The U.S. was already entangled in the Vietnam War before American troops began landing there. As the National Constitution Center reports, Kennedy's administration had indirectly supported a coup that toppled South Vietnamese President Ngo Dinh Diem, and Kennedy had concerns about Vietnam, quote, going down the drain. Of course, it was the 1964 Gulf of Tonkin resolution that allowed Lyndon Johnson to commit massive numbers of American troops to the conflict, but had Kennedy still been in power at the time, it might have been a different story.
In the final analysis, it's their war. They're the ones who have to win it or lose it.
Brown University scholar Koji Masutani and his team researched Kennedy's administration and found that the late president had a tendency to reject the advice of his military commanders, as was the case in the Bay of Pigs invasion and the Cuban Missile Crisis, in favor of diplomatic solutions. Indeed, the Masutani team concluded that Kennedy would have wanted the U.S. out of Vietnam completely by 1966.
Currently, there are about 267,000 U.S. fighting men in Vietnam, and 18,000 more will be there by the end of this month.
However, as Live Science reports, Kennedy's brother Robert told reporters that the former president had no intention of getting out of the entanglement. But needless to say, all this is speculation as a result of the tragic events in Dallas that day.